everyone. I am Alura Imara Grace A. Bailon.
I am Marisol V. Encarnacion.
Catherine Bundal,
And we are the reporters for today.
At the end of the lesson, the students should be able to understand how the curriculum can be evaluated by the assessment of learning outcomes.
Identify the levels of learning outcomes and levels of assessment.
Match the level of learning outcomes with appropriate assessment tools.
Interpret the value of assessment in terms of grades assigned.
Achieved learning outcomes. Achieved learning outcomes is defined in outcomes-based education as a product of what have been intended in the beginning of the learning process. Indicators of the learning outcomes which are accomplished are called achieved learning outcomes. Standards and competencies are used as the indicators and measures of these outcomes. The Philippine educational system is divided into 8 levels. In each level, the learners are expected to achieve specific standards and competencies of the learning outcomes. The 8 levels of complexity of learning outcomes are based on 3 domains which are knowledge, skills, and values, application, and responsibility degree of independence.
The 4 levels of learning outcomes are knowledge, process, understanding, and performance. Knowledge, process, understanding, performance reflect different learning outcomes that are arranged in hierarchy or complexity.
Types of tests to measure knowledge, process, and understanding. Objective tests. It requires only one and one correct answer. It is difficult to construct but easy to check. Fourth, matching type test. The most common matching type test is made up of 2 parallel columns. The first column is the premise that presents the problem, and the second column provides the answer. While in imperfect matching type, the number of premises in column A is not equal to the number of responses in column B, or the other way around. The response or the premise can be used more than once.
Essay. Test items allow students freedom of response. Students are free to select, relate, and present ideas in their own words. The type of answers would reflect the extent of the learner's knowledge of the subject matter, ability to use higher order thinking skills, and express ideas in an accurate, creative, and appropriate language. Extended response item. The student is generally free to select any factual information that can help in organizing the response. The contents of an extended essay will depend on the analysis, synthesis, evaluation, and other higher order thinking skills of the test takers. Restricted response item. This is like an expanded form of short answer type objectives test. There is a limit on both the content and scope and the form of student response. It is most useful in measuring learning outcomes that require the interpretation and application of data in a specific area. For example, what are the main body parts of plant? Describe each part. And why is the barometer one of the most useful instruments to forecast weather? Explain in one paragraph. Assessment tools to measure authentic learning performance and products. Level 4 of the learning outcomes in K-POP can be assessed through performance or product. These learning outcomes can best be done through the use of authentic evaluation. Authentic evaluation is a test that measures real-life tasks, performances, and actual products.
Levels of assessment for the levels of learning outcomes. Through DepEd Order 73 series of 2012, levels of learning outcomes are also the levels of assessment. Levels of assessment describe levels of the learning outcomes which are knowledge, process or skills, understanding, and products or performance. Placing value to assessment results from K-POP. The computed value of the 4 levels of assessment will be described according to the value of composite scores of the students.
Placing value to the assessment results in the new grading system, DepEd Order 8 series of 2015. While the K-pop is still utilized in the new grading system, it is important to know that DepEd Order 8 has modified the grading system as follows. Kindergarten use a checklist, anecdotal records, and portfolios are used instead of numerical grades which are based on kindergarten curriculum guide. In grade 1 to 12, the following guidelines should be followed. Learners are graded on 3 components every quarter: written work, performance tasks, and quarterly tests.
How grades are computed at the end of the school year. For kindergarten, checklists, anecdotal records, and portfolios are presented to the parents at the quarter for discussion. For grade 1 to 10, the average of the quarter grades produces the end of the year grade, and the general average is computed by dividing the sum of all final grades by the total number of learning areas. Each learning area has equal weight. For grade 11 and 12, the average of the quarterly grade produces the semestral grade, and the general average is computed by dividing the sum of all semestral final grades.
We hope that you have learned a lot from this lesson.
Thanks for watching! Goodbye!